Hi, I'm Beth Saunders. I'm the Settlement Supervisor here at Citizens Advice Liverpool. So I work on the Hong Kong Welcome Programme with Anthony, who will be talking later, as well as the EU Settlement Scheme project as well. I've been working on the EU Settlement Scheme project in Merseyside now for about 3 years, maybe to the date actually. So I know a lot about kind of the history of it over the last 3 years, and the kind of timeline of events of it all. So today I'm going to just focus on talking about the EU Settlement Scheme. So the sort of question that I'm going to ask and then try and answer is, the EU Settlement Scheme, surely all EU citizens are settled now, aren't they? Okay, so last week I spoke with a European family. They'd been living in the UK for 2 years before the Brexit day of the 31st of December 2020, when freedom of movement was still allowed. A family comprising of parents, a son and a daughter. The distressed parents attended the office in Wavertree and presented to me several documents and emails which they could not understand. This included 2 formal letters from the Home Office directed to the young teenage boy. Your application to the EU Settlement Scheme has been rejected. Not just 1, but 2 refusal letters to a boy whose mother had already been granted the status to live in the UK. You may think, why does this child need an immigration status anyway? Under the law, he needs to apply for EUSS, and in the future, he'll have to face the hostile environment, having to prove his immigration status when getting accommodation of his own, applying for a job, applying for university, and so on. Whilst this was frustrating and disappointing to see, I was relieved that our EU Settlement Scheme project was still running and that the family had been able to access free advice and support from our organisation. This case is one of hundreds we have supported here at Citizens Advice Liverpool over the past 3 years, with our caseload being at a constant 70+ clients based in Merseyside. I would say that EU citizens are far from settled in the UK. So there's 5 kind of different things that I'm going to talk about here. So the first one is children, babies and young people. So not only are children's applications being refused, but many have not even been made. Many EU parents presumed their children were British or that they didn't have to apply to the scheme as the parents have already applied, or just because they're children. Babies who were born after the deadline are only given 3 months to submit an application, 3 months. So this must include a valid passport or a national identity card, which takes at least 6 months from most embassies. And that's after you've got your birth certificate sorted. I wonder how much this will cost for the new parents as well. The second point is about Home Office delays. So we have all heard about the delays with immigration applications within the Home Office. Many clients we support have been waiting weeks, months, and sometimes 2 years for a response on their EU Settlement Scheme application, waiting in anxiety to find out whether the UK will accept you to continue residing in a country you consider your home is quite frankly unsettling. What happens if I'm not accepted? Will I be reported to Rwanda? Who knows? Number 3 and 4 is kind of 2 points that kind of can go together. So digital barriers and right to work checks. So Citizens Advice Liverpool have partnered with the University of Liverpool to research the digital barriers of the EU Settlement Scheme. Our research report shows that many EA citizens and their family members have been discriminated against by their employer as their way of proving their right to work in the UK has changed. It's now all online and involves a share code. What's that? It's very different from showing a passport, and it's very difficult for those with limited digital access or skills. This is the Home Office's way forwards with immigration statuses now, online by default. A few months ago, a teacher in a British secondary school asked a class who has access to Wi-Fi at home, as she set a project for them to do some research on something that they'd been studying that day. So who has access to Wi-Fi at home? Can you guess how many students put their hands up? It was half of the class. So So this just shows how sort of out of touch the EU settlement scheme is. You know, we have so many clients who face digital barriers when so many people still don't even have Wi-Fi. The EU settlement scheme is entirely digital, and this has caused huge problems for our clients, especially when they are trying to apply for a new job in the UK. What happens to those who haven't applied? Maybe you didn't know about the EU settlement scheme, as so many Brexit communications has been about trade and airports. Maybe you weren't able to access advice in the northwest of England due to limited funding. Maybe you can't afford a new passport or ID card. Maybe your application got cancelled because your friend helped you out with the application because you couldn't access support because of COVID and filled out something incorrectly as it was advertised as easy and straightforward to use. Maybe you could not afford to pay £75 and travel costs for a biometric residence card. Maybe you couldn't access the Home Office's dedicated helpline as there was constantly a queue and they don't provide any sort of translation and you might not speak English fluently. Maybe you have 4 children who all need passports to apply to the scheme and that's going to be really expensive. Or maybe you thought your rights would be protected and you already had enough on your plate, a pandemic and a cost of living crisis, for example. We are now working with endless clients who are currently in very vulnerable situations, losing income through not being able to apply for a job and or universal credit for those who need it, and sometimes accommodation as well. They are now continuing to live the lives they lived before Brexit in a country which policies treat them with hostility when applying for jobs and accommodation, having to prove their basic rights at each turn. The deadline to apply for the EU settlement scheme closed 1 year and 1 week ago. The Home Office are still accepting late applications if you have a reasonable excuse. Citizens Advice Liverpool can help you submit a late application to the EU settlement scheme so that you can continue to reside and exercise your rights in the UK. I'm going to put in the chat box our contact details. We offer advice mainly via the phone, but we can also provide email advice or book you in for an appointment at our office in Wavertree, Garston or Walton.